You know that person. The one who finds a reason to chuckle at literally everything. The one who discovers a joke in the middle of a crisis that would leave most people paralyzed. Yeah, there's a high probability they've navigated some significant internal wreckage. It's as if their inner world is a city that was leveled by an earthquake, and they've had to rebuild the entire infrastructure with their own bare hands. I'm not talking about a failed driving test. I'm not talking about an awkward prom. I'm referring to the kind of life events that fundamentally recalibrate your entire worldview. Someone cuts them off on the highway. Do they lean on the horn? Do they scream? No. They're already mentally 3 steps ahead. They're wondering if that driver is racing to the hospital, dealing with a family tragedy, or maybe they just have a plumbing emergency at home. Because when you've weathered your own hurricanes, other people's light drizzles just feel different. To them, the daily stresses that make others panic feel like a light mist on the skin. The mist on the skin of someone who has already survived a freezing shipwreck in the middle of the ocean. Here is the thing that nobody ever tells you about people who have carried too much weight for too long. Their brain is operating on a different frequency. It isn't broken. It's been precision-tuned. Their mind is no longer a simple house. It has become a high-security bunker, reinforced with steel plates at every window. Why? Because it knows exactly what the wind is capable of doing. It was forced by necessity to evolve into this complex survival masterpiece. A masterpiece that is still trying to figure out how to function in a world where the immediate danger has passed. But there is something even more peculiar happening beneath the surface. These individuals develop what is, essentially, a psychological immunity to the chaos of life. It's not an immunity to pain, not exactly. It's an immunity to being completely shattered by it. They've discovered, through blood and experience, that surviving isn't just a possibility. It is an absolute certainty. This is where the narrative shifts. You would assume that someone who has walked through fire would be cynical, right? Cold, distant, perhaps bitter. But quite often, it's the exact opposite. They end up being the most profoundly empathetic people you will ever encounter. And I'm talking about aggressively empathetic. They can detect a tremor of pain in someone else from across the street. They have become fluent in that specific language. A tiny change in your vocal inflection, they caught it. That practiced fake smile, they've seen it. They're already brainstorming how to reach out to you later tonight without making you feel cornered. They have learned how to interpret silence, not just the quiet between words, but the actual texture of it. They can tell if a pause is heavy with regret, sharp with irritation, or just weighed down by exhaustion. They sense shifts in the emotional atmosphere, the same way a sailor senses a shift in the wind. Most people walk into a room and notice the decor. They walk in and immediately read the emotional temperature. And here is something truly remarkable that grows out of all that suffering. They often undergo what the psychologist Richard Tedeschi identifies as post-traumatic growth. According to his research, extensive research, somewhere between 50 and 66% of people who endure significant trauma don't just recover, they bounce forward. This growth isn't just recovery. It's like a bone that breaks and then heals so thick, so calcified, that it becomes the strongest point in the entire skeleton. Their interpersonal bonds become deeper. Their core values become crystal clear. Their gratitude for the most mundane moments becomes almost startlingly intense. They will literally find themselves moved to tears by a beautiful morning sky, and they don't even care who sees it. But then there is the side of it that nobody warned you about. These same individuals often live with a persistent state of hypervigilance. Their internal radar for threats, it never really shuts down. Have you ever gone to a cafe with someone who absolutely has to sit with their back to the wall? Or someone who has 5 different contingency plans for a simple weekend lunch? That isn't paranoia. That is a nervous system that learned the hard way that safety is a privilege you earn, not a guarantee you are born with. Their nervous system is like a soldier who has returned from the front lines but still hears the click of a trigger every time a floorboard creaks in the hallway. And here is a detail that will really make you think. They often minimize their own history, constantly. "Oh, it really wasn't that bad," they'll say. "Other people have been through much worse than me. I'm doing fine, honestly." It is as if they have developed a literal allergy to being seen as a victim. They survived by convincing themselves they were okay. So, admitting that things are actually hard, it feels like an admission of defeat. The irony is honestly pretty heartbreaking. Let's look at their relationships for a second. People who have been through too much usually end up being either fiercely loyal or incredibly guarded. Sometimes they are both. At the exact same time, they will show up on your doorstep at 4 a.m. to help you through a crisis without a second thought. But if you ask them to be honest about their own needs, suddenly they're more elusive than a ghost in a storm. Why? Because historically, closeness has always come with a price tag. When your early life taught you that human connection can be chaotic, your nervous system doesn't relax when someone gets close. It braces for impact. Opening up to someone feels like inviting a stranger into a room full of precious porcelain, while the floor is actively shaking. You want the company, but you're waiting, just waiting, for the sound of breaking glass. Many develop this internal conflict. They crave intimacy, but they are terrified of being dependent. In their experience, depending on someone meant you were vulnerable to being hurt. So, they train themselves to need nobody. It looks like strength from the outside, until you realize how incredibly lonely it feels on the inside. But then, something incredible happens, something most people overlook. These people become exceptionally gifted at navigating change. A new career path? Sure. Moving to a different country? Why not? Their whole world falling apart? That's just a typical Tuesday. And the humor, the humor is on another level entirely. Dark humor, specifically. It isn't about being cruel. It isn't about being insensitive. It's about stripping the power away from the pain. When you can find something to laugh at in the middle of your own suffering, the suffering loses its grip on you. Comedy becomes a shield. Every joke is a small, quiet rebellion against the things that tried to destroy them. Now, here is something that might catch you off guard.
People who have been through too much often have a very intense relationship with the concept of control. They will micromanage the tiniest aspects of their daily routine, while being strangely calm about massive, life-altering uncertainties. Why? Because they've realized that the big things are usually out of their hands anyway. But the small things, those, they can handle. So yes, they might have a total meltdown over which notebook to buy, while remaining completely composed about a sudden job loss. The contradiction is exactly the point. They are walking paradoxes. They are tough, but incredibly tender. They are guarded, but remarkably generous. They are hopeful, but deeply realistic. They have learned that you can hold two conflicting truths at the same time. Life can be stunning, and it can be brutal, often in the same heartbeat. But here is the part that rarely gets discussed. There is a deep-seated grief underneath all of this. Not the grief of mourning a person, but the grief of mourning the version of themselves they lost. They grieve the person who used to trust people without hesitation. The version of them who could laugh without scanning the room for exits first. The version who didn't have to rehearse their phone calls or look for hidden meanings in every silence. They grieve the self that felt light, the self that didn't constantly worry about being too much for people or not enough for the world. The version that moved through life without their chest tightening at every unknown variable. How do you explain to someone that you miss a version of yourself that you can barely even remember? How do you tell someone that you are homesick for a place that only exists in your own imagination? This grief is like searching for a specific key to a house that was burned down decades ago. You still feel the weight of it in your pocket, but there's no longer a door it can open. A childhood you didn't get to fully experience, a softness you weren't allowed to keep, a sense of freedom you only discovered once it was too late. This grief doesn't break them, though. It shapes them. It makes them more quiet, more observant, more intentional. It transforms them into someone who treasures peace because they know exactly how much chaos costs. Someone who values safe people because unsafe people taught them how much it hurts to be unprotected. And perhaps that is the real psychological takeaway here. People who have gone through too much don't just get through it. They develop an incredibly complex, multi-layered understanding of what it actually means to be a human being. They know that true strength isn't about never falling to pieces. It's about how many times you are willing to put yourself back together, even when some of the pieces don't seem to fit the same way anymore. Their survival turned into wisdom. Their agony turned into kindness. And without even realizing it, they became something incredibly rare, a lighthouse. Not because their path was easy, but because they learned how to steer through storms that would have capsized anyone else.
A lighthouse doesn't shine because it's flawless. It shines because it has seen the darkness and knows the way out. So, the next time you encounter someone who seems just a little too comfortable with chaos, a little too unfazed by uncertainty, or a little too quick to find the joke in their own tragedy, just realize they have earned that depth. Every laugh, every boundary, every moment of sudden insight. They have been through far too much. And yet, somehow, they are still standing here, still trying, still searching for reasons to believe in something better.
They are the lighthouses of the human experience, standing on jagged rocks and using their own past scars as the fuel to keep the lamp burning for everyone else still lost at sea. That isn't just a psychological phenomenon. That is poetry in motion.